A reckless prince entered the sacred forest, seeking nothing but the thrill of the hunt, but what he didn't know was that the forest harbored a secret far older and more powerful than any royal bloodline. What happened next would change the course of his destiny, topple the kingdom he was meant to rule, and awaken a power he could never control. He thought he was merely hunting for glory, but instead, he was about to awaken the wrath of the sea itself. This would be the most dangerous game he ever played, and the beginning of his reckoning. What he didn't realize was that the woman he violated beneath the hidden waterfall was no ordinary maiden, but a creature of the deep, with the power to unravel his life with a single whisper. His arrogance would be his downfall. Just before we dive deeper into this epic tale, we'd love to know where you're watching from. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow, we've got an extra special story lined up for you, and you definitely won't want to miss it. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a pale glow over the dense Azarim forest. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and the soft rustle of leaves. Prince Jabari, heir to the Azarim kingdom, galloped through the woods on his horse, his bow and arrows slung across his back. He had ventured deep into the heart of the forest, seeking to prove his strength to the people, to show them that he was more than just a prince born with privilege. But as the moonlight filtered through the trees, a strange sound reached his ears, a soft splash, like the gentle ripple of water. Curious and eager to explore, Jabari urged his horse forward, pushing through the underbrush until he arrived at the source of the sound. There, hidden beneath a thick canopy of trees, was a secret waterfall. The water cascaded from a high cliff, shimmering in the moonlight, pooling into a serene lake below. And standing in that water, as if she were part of the very stream itself, was a woman. Her skin glistened like liquid gold, her hair dark as the night sky, and her eyes gleamed with a mysterious, otherworldly beauty. She was bathing beneath the waterfall, unaware of Jabari's presence. Jabari's heart skipped a beat. His arrogance flared, and without a second thought, he dismounted his horse. He stepped closer, drawn to her, his mind clouded with desire. "Who are you, beautiful one?" he called out, his voice rich with confidence. The woman's head snapped up, her eyes locking onto his. A flicker of shock passed through her gaze, quickly replaced by a cold, calculating look. She took a step back, retreating into the water. "Leave me be, Prince Jabari," she warned, her voice soft, yet firm, like the calm before a storm. "I do not seek your company." But Jabari was not used to being rejected. He stepped closer, his eyes filled with lust and hunger. "I will not be denied," he sneered, ignoring her plea. Before she could escape, he reached for her, pulling her toward him with surprising strength. The woman struggled, but Jabari's grip was unyielding. He forced himself upon her, ignoring her cries for mercy. As the moment passed, she vanished beneath the water, her body disappearing into the depths with a swift, fluid motion. Jabari stood at the edge of the water, breathing heavily, a satisfied smirk on his face. He laughed to himself, the sound echoing through the empty forest. "Foolish woman," he muttered, turning to leave. But as he walked away, something strange happened. An icy chill began to creep up his spine, settling deep within his bones. The forest seemed to grow colder, and the very air felt as if it had turned to ice. His heart pounded in his chest as the chill spread throughout his body, making him tremble. That night, as he lay in his bed in the palace, trying to sleep off the strange sensation, a voice echoed through his dreams. It was soft at first, like the distant rumble of thunder, but it grew clearer with each passing second. "You will never be a man again," the voice whispered, sending a shiver through his body. Jabari awoke with a start, his heart racing. He felt an emptiness between his legs, a hollow, aching void where his manhood had once been. Panic gripped him as he reached down, but there was nothing there. His body, once full of strength and pride, now felt foreign to him. The weight of his arrogance and the memory of what he had done to the woman beneath the waterfall flooded his mind. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Prince Jabari, now King Jabari, ruled the Azarim kingdom with an iron fist, but a deep emptiness gnawed at him. He could no longer enjoy the pleasures he once had. His wives, once eager to bear him children, now whispered in hushed tones behind his back. The kingdom, too, had begun to question his strength. His people murmured that their king was weak, and his power was no longer what it had been. Jabari's heart ached with the weight of their doubt. He had everything, land, riches, and the throne, but without an heir, his legacy was in jeopardy. His mind constantly returned to the woman he had wronged beneath the waterfall. The chill he had felt that night had not left him. It lingered, haunting him, a reminder of his foolishness. One evening, as a fierce storm raged outside the palace walls, a figure appeared at the gates. The winds howled, and the rain fell in sheets, but the figure moved through the storm as if it were nothing. The guards attempted to stop him, but the boy was swift, slipping past them with ease. His appearance was striking, tall, with wild black hair and eyes that gleamed like the crashing waves. There was something unnervingly familiar about him, something that made Jabari's heart skip a beat when he saw him enter the throne room. The boy's voice was like the sound of thunder, deep and powerful, yet laced with an eerie calm. "I am here to claim what is mine," the boy declared, his gaze fixed on Jabari with an intensity that sent a shiver down the king's spine. "My mother sent me to take what is rightfully mine, the throne of Azarim." Jabari stared at him, confused, but something deep inside him began to stir. He could feel it in his bones, the same chill he had felt the night he had crossed the Mermaid. "You," Jabari's voice trembled. "You are my son." The boy nodded, his eyes never leaving Jabari's. "I am the son of the woman you abandoned. And now, I have come to claim the throne that is mine by right." Jabari's mind raced, trying to make sense of the boy's words. His breath caught in his throat as he finally understood the full weight of what he had done. The woman beneath the waterfall had not been just any woman. She had been a mermaid, a being of great power, and in his arrogance, Jabari had destroyed her life. And now, she had sent her son, her heir, to claim the throne that Jabari had taken for himself. "You don't deserve this kingdom," the boy spat, his voice cold and accusing. "You are not a man. You are a shadow of what you once were. And now, you will pay for your crimes." Jabari staggered back, his mind reeling. The boy's words cut deep, but it was the realization that he had been cursed that truly struck him. He had lost his manhood, and in its place, a deeper punishment had taken root. The throne would never be his. The bloodline would not continue through him. His arrogance, his pride, had doomed him. But Jabari was not one to give up easily. Despite the curse, despite the boy's claims, he would fight to hold onto the throne. He would not let his legacy crumble. "You may be my son," Jabari growled, his voice low and dangerous. "But I will not yield the throne so easily." The boy smiled, a twisted grin that mirrored the storm raging outside. "We shall see, father. We shall see." The storm outside raged louder, as if the heavens themselves were reacting to the words spoken in that room. The tension between father and son crackled in the air, a battle of wills that would determine the fate of the Azarim kingdom. And thus, the story of King Jabari and his cursed legacy began. The thunder outside grew louder, the heavens themselves seemingly echoing the rage in the heart of the storm. King Jabari stood frozen, his mind whirling with disbelief as the boy before him, the one claiming to be his son, continued to meet his gaze with an unblinking, unwavering stare. Jabari's pride, the one thing that had defined him throughout his life, flared up within him, despite the gnawing emptiness that he now felt in his soul. His heart thundered in his chest as he took a step forward, trying to regain his composure. "You speak of my crimes, boy, but do you truly know what it means to rule? To wear the crown that I have fought for all these years?" Jabari's voice was thick with anger, though beneath it, there was a trace of fear. Fear that something far greater than he could understand was happening. The boy's lip curled into a defiant smile. "You think you earned this throne? This kingdom?" He laughed, a harsh, cold sound that sent a chill through the throne room, despite the storm's heat. "You did not earn it, father. You took it. And when you took it, you stole something far more important than you could have ever realized. Jabari's mind raced. What was this boy talking about? What was it that he had stolen? And why was he so sure of his claim? The boy stepped closer, the power in his presence undeniable. You think that your arrogance and your greed have gone unnoticed? You think that I do not know the truth of what happened that night at the waterfall? His eyes gleamed, dark and full of an unsettling knowledge. You took something from her. And now you will pay the price. The word "her" hung heavy in the air, a silent reminder of the mermaid beneath the waterfall, the woman Jabari had wronged. I didn't take anything from anyone. Jabari snapped, though his voice trembled with uncertainty. She came to me, and I. The boy raised a hand, cutting him off. You don't even remember, do you? The curse she placed upon you was not just for the moment. It was for your soul, your very essence. And it has been festering inside of you ever since. You thought you could escape it. But now, you will see its true power. Jabari's chest tightened as the weight of the boy's words settled in. He had lived for years under the shadow of a curse, never fully understanding what had happened that night. He had felt the emptiness within him, the loss of his manhood, but he had convinced himself it was something else, something temporary. Now, standing before the boy, his own flesh and blood, the reality hit him with crushing force. The boy's voice was quiet now, almost too soft to hear, but his words were as sharp as daggers. You will never be a true man again, father. And the throne. It is mine by right. I will take it from you, whether you like it or not. Jabari's mind spun, confusion, anger, and fear colliding in his chest. He had long been the king, no one had ever dared question his rule before. Yet now, this boy, this strange, powerful figure standing before him, had arrived to take what was his. His throne. His legacy. Everything he had built. But Jabari was not one to go down without a fight. His pride, even in the face of the curse that haunted him, flared like a flame. You dare challenge me, boy, he said, his voice low and threatening. I will not surrender my kingdom to you, no matter who your mother is. I am king of Azarim. And you will learn to respect that. The boy's eyes narrowed. You still do not understand, do you? He said, his voice now sharp, his tone full of contempt. I do not seek your throne. I seek what you owe to my mother. You abandoned her. And now, you will face the consequences. Jabari could feel his heart racing faster, his pulse quickening as the boy's words hit him like a physical blow. What do you mean? What does she want from me? The boy's lips parted in a faint, bitter smile. She does not want anything from you. But the ocean does. The sea has always claimed what it is owed. And now, it is time for you to give back what you have stolen. Jabari's thoughts spiraled. He remembered the moment, the brief, twisted encounter under the waterfall. How could something so fleeting have caused such lasting consequences? And why had he never thought of the mermaid again, never considered the gravity of what he had done? He looked at the boy, his son, and saw the truth in his eyes. This child, with his strange power, was not merely a threat to his throne. He was the result of Jabari's hubris, the living embodiment of his sin. The realization hit him hard. There would be no escaping this. There would be no denying his guilt. The boy continued, his voice full of a deep, resonating power that seemed to come from the depths of the ocean itself. The storm outside. It is not just nature, father. It is a warning. The sea is angry, and you cannot escape its fury. The throne you hold is a fragile thing. A mere illusion. The words echoed in Jabari's mind like a death knell. The storm outside, the boy's arrival, the curse, it was all connected. Everything had been set into motion the moment he had violated the mermaid. Jabari's knees buckled beneath him, and he collapsed onto his throne, the weight of his own misdeeds crushing him. For days, Jabari could not think clearly. His thoughts were consumed by the boy, his son, and the dark truth he had uncovered. The storm had not stopped since the boy's arrival, and it felt as though the world itself was unraveling before his eyes. The boy, whose name Jabari still did not know, had made his camp in the royal gardens. Each time Jabari attempted to speak to him, the boy would only give him a cold, emotionless glance. He had no intention of reconciliation or understanding. He had come for what was owed to him, and to his mother. Jabari knew he had to act. He had to regain control of his kingdom, or it would slip from his grasp forever. But how could he? The boy's power was undeniable, and the curse that had bound him seemed to be growing stronger by the day. Every moment that passed, Jabari felt more and more like a prisoner in his own body. Desperation clawed at him. He sent for his wisest advisors, the most powerful magicians and seers in the kingdom, hoping to find a solution. But no one could offer him the answers he so desperately needed. His wives, too, had begun to grow distant, whispering amongst themselves. The very air in the palace was thick with tension, as if everyone could sense the storm brewing, both outside and within. Jabari knew the time for action was coming, and he would have to make a choice between clinging to the throne that he had stolen or facing the reality that he had already lost it. But even as he prepared to confront his son, the darkness in his heart whispered one final, dangerous thought: could he still find a way to turn the tables? Could he find a way to reclaim his kingdom, his manhood, and his legacy? And so, the battle for the throne began, not just between father and son, but between a king and his own fate. Jabari, desperate and filled with a burning desire to reclaim his birthright, sought a solution from places even darker than the secrets he had already uncovered. The sea's fury had only worsened, the storm outside the palace growing in intensity as the days wore on. In the darkest hours of the night, a cloaked figure arrived at the palace gates. This figure was known only in whispers, a shadow among shadows, an ancient sorcerer who dealt in things better left forgotten. "I hear you seek power, King Jabari," the sorcerer's voice was low, almost a hiss. "I can help you, but it will cost you." Jabari, his mind clouded with the thought of regaining control, nodded eagerly. "I will pay any price." The sorcerer's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "Power, yes, but be warned, the price will be greater than you think. Do not seek to defy fate itself, for the sea is unforgiving." With no other option, Jabari agreed to the sorcerer's terms, unaware that in doing so, he was sealing his kingdom's fate. The price for regaining his power was steep, but would it be enough to reclaim the throne from his son? Would he be able to confront the curse and the storm, or was it already too late? The answers to these questions would soon be revealed. As the days passed, the storm outside the palace seemed to grow in intensity, as if mirroring Jabari's own growing desperation. The skies were filled with dark, swirling clouds that never seemed to part. The palace itself trembled, as if the very foundations of the kingdom were being tested. And then, one day, the storm stopped. The air grew still, and for the first time in weeks, the sun broke through the clouds. But it was not a moment of peace. It was a sign that something terrible was about to unfold. Jabari's mind raced. Had the sorcerer's magic worked? Had he truly reclaimed his power, or was this merely a brief respite before the final blow? The answer would come soon enough. Jabari's son, standing at the gates of the palace, waited. His eyes were dark, filled with the anger and pain that Jabari had caused. It was time for the final confrontation, the moment of reckoning. The throne of Azarim would be claimed. But who would be left standing when the dust settled? Would Jabari fight to the bitter end, or would his son, his true heir, finally take his rightful place as ruler of Azarim? The storm was over. And now, the real battle was about to begin. The silence that followed the storm was eerie. The once deafening roar of thunder had fallen to an unnatural quiet, as though the world itself was holding its breath. King Jabari stood at the entrance of the grand palace, staring down at the boy, his son, who stood before him like a figure of vengeance and destiny. The boy had not moved from his position at the gates, his eyes glowing with a quiet fury that seemed to echo the storm that had just passed. His stance was calm but resolute, his expression unwavering. Jabari's heart beat heavily in his chest. The throne, the power he had spent his entire life acquiring, felt increasingly distant as the minutes passed. His son, no, his true heir, had come to claim it, and despite his arrogance, despite the countless years he had spent ruling Azerim, Jabari knew he was no longer in control. With every passing moment, the boy's power seemed to grow stronger, radiating from him like a force of nature. It was clear that the storm had not just been a tempest of wind and rain, it had been a reflection of the deep rift between father and son, a rift that could never be healed. Jabari, the boy's voice broke through the tension, dark and heavy like the waves crashing against the shore. Do you understand now? Do you see what you have done to this kingdom? To the people you were meant to protect? Jabari's eyes narrowed. He had always believed that his strength was his greatest asset, that his power, his rule, had been unassailable. But standing before his son, he felt small, trapped within the same walls of his own arrogance that had led to his downfall. The boy continued, his voice rising like the ocean at high tide. You took everything from me, from her. And now, you will give it back. The throne is mine by right, by blood. Your reign is over. Jabari's hands clenched into fists. I will never give up what is mine, he spat, his voice breaking with a mix of fury and desperation. You are nothing but a child, a pawn in some twisted game of fate. I am king. I am the ruler of Azerim. But as the words left his mouth, something inside him faltered. The storm outside had stopped, but the storm within him had only intensified. The boy, his son, had a power that Jabari could never match. A power that was not just physical, but spiritual, connected to the very forces of the sea itself. With a sharp, swift movement, the boy lifted his hand, and suddenly, the earth beneath their feet trembled. The ground cracked open, a massive fissure forming in the center of the courtyard, as though the kingdom itself was rebelling against Jabari's rule. Jabari stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock as he felt the raw power emanating from his son. This was no ordinary child, this was the product of the Mermaid's curse, a force that he had never fully understood, but was now painfully aware of. You were warned, the boy said, his voice calm despite the chaos unfolding around them. The sea never forgets. And neither do I. Jabari's breath caught in his throat. He had been so consumed by his own arrogance, so sure of his invincibility, that he had failed to recognize the true cost of his actions. The mermaid, the curse, and now his son, all of it had been part of a greater plan, one that he had never seen coming. I didn't know, Jabari whispered, the words tasting foreign on his tongue. I didn't know it would come to this. I was wrong. But it's too late now, isn't it? You've come to take everything from me. The boy's eyes softened, just for a moment, as though some small part of him still held onto the remnants of what might have been a father-son bond. But that moment passed quickly, replaced by the cold resolve of someone who had seen too much, someone who had suffered for too long. Not everything, the boy replied quietly. But I will take the throne. It is mine. And you will step down, Jabari. If not willingly, then by force. With those words, the boy raised his hand once more, and the ground trembled again. The skies above them darkened as though the heavens themselves were aligning against Jabari. The winds picked up, swirling around the palace like a violent whirlwind. Jabari's knees buckled, the weight of the curse and the boy's power bearing down on him. The throne he had once claimed so easily now felt like an anchor, dragging him into the depths of the ocean from which there was no return. Please, Jabari begged, his voice cracking. I have fought for this kingdom. I have protected it, built it, loved it. Don't take it from me. Don't take everything I have. But the boy only shook his head, his gaze steely and unyielding. You never understood what it truly meant to protect this kingdom, father. You thought it was about power. You thought it was about control. But it was about understanding the land, the people, the forces that govern this world. He paused, his voice growing cold. It was about knowing that the sea, the earth, and the sky are all connected. That our fates are intertwined. And you broke that connection. Jabari's heart hammered in his chest, the truth of his son's words sinking deep into his bones. He had been blind, his ambition clouding his judgment. He had never respected the balance of nature, the sacred harmony that held the world together. Now, standing before the boy who was destined to take his place, Jabari knew the full weight of his sins. "Then what must I do?" Jabari asked, his voice hollow. "How can I make things right?" The boy's expression softened just slightly, the hint of pity in his eyes. "There is no way to undo what has been done, Father. The only choice you have now is to accept that the throne is no longer yours. Step down, and allow me to rule as I was meant to." Jabari looked around at the kingdom he had fought so hard to protect. The people, the lands, the royal palace, all of it had been built by his hand. But now, in the face of his son's power, in the shadow of the curse that had followed him for years, Jabari knew that he had no choice but to surrender. With a heavy heart, Jabari dropped to his knees before his son. The weight of his crown felt unbearable now, like a heavy burden he no longer deserved to carry. I yield," Jabari said, his voice a whisper, barely audible above the wind. "You are the rightful king. The throne is yours." The boy nodded, a flicker of something, perhaps relief, perhaps a form of compassion, passing through his eyes. "It is not about taking the throne, Father," he said softly. "It is about restoring what has been lost. The sea has claimed its due. And now, it is time for us to rebuild." Jabari lowered his head in submission, his gaze falling to the ground as his son stepped forward, reclaiming the throne that had once been his. And as the boy took his rightful place, the winds around the palace settled, and the storm finally began to fade. But the true storm, the one that had been brewing within Jabari's heart for years, remained. As the boy, now king, sat upon the throne, a silence settled over Azarim. The kingdom, once strong and vibrant under Jabari's rule, was now facing a new chapter, one filled with uncertainty and hope. But even as the boy claimed his place as ruler, Jabari knew that the storm was not over. For the sea, once placated, still whispered its secrets, secrets that would shape the future of the kingdom. And Jabari, now a broken man, could only wait to see what the true cost of his arrogance would be. The curse had been set in motion. And in the end, it would be the sea that decided the fate of Azarim. The day after Jabari yielded the throne, a heavy silence hung over Azarim. The kingdom, still reeling from the events of the previous night, was quiet, too quiet. The people dared not speak too loudly of the fallen king or the new ruler who had arrived with the storm. There was an air of uncertainty, a tension that gripped the land like an unspoken truth. In the royal palace, the newly crowned king, Jabari's son, stood on the balcony, staring out over the city below. His gaze was unwavering, as though he could see beyond the horizon, into the future that awaited them all. The storm had passed, but the winds that followed it were harsh and unrelenting, much like the boy himself. As king, he had inherited more than just the throne. He had inherited a kingdom in turmoil, a people divided, and a bloodline steeped in betrayal. The weight of his father's actions hung heavy on his shoulders, but the boy, no, the young king, had no time for grief or regret. His heart was set on one thing, restoring balance to Azarim, no matter the cost. The palace was bustling with activity, as courtiers and servants moved through the halls with hushed voices, casting nervous glances at the new ruler. The whispers of Jabari's downfall were already spreading like wildfire, but there was no one willing to speak openly about it. No one dared. A soft knock on the door pulled the boy from his thoughts. He turned to see one of his most trusted advisors, Tolu, entering with a respectful bow. "Your Majesty," Tolu said, his voice steady but laden with the gravity of the situation. "There is news from the southern borders. The people are restless. They fear the change in leadership, and there have been rumors of dissent." The king's expression hardened, his jaw tightening. Descent. Are they questioning my rule already? Tolu nodded. It is not so much a matter of questioning your rule, your majesty. It is the legacy of your father, King Jabari, that casts a long shadow. His actions, his arrogance, have left a mark on this kingdom. The people may accept you as their king, but they will not forget what was done. The king's fists clenched. He knew Tolu spoke the truth. His father's reign had been marked by pride, greed, and a refusal to listen to the needs of the people. The king's rise had been swift, but it was built on the crumbling foundations of his father's mistakes. "What do you suggest we do?" the king asked, his voice low. "We must show the people that you are different from your father," Tolu replied. "We must prove that you are a king who will lead with compassion, who will restore the balance that was lost under Jabari's rule. It will take time, but you must earn their trust." The king nodded, his gaze turning once again to the horizon. The winds were still strong, but they were no longer a storm. They were a reminder of the forces that governed the world, a reminder that the kingdom was fragile, its fate hanging by a thread. "I will not fail them," the king said, his voice firm. "I will restore Azarim to its former glory. And I will start with the people." Tolu gave a respectful bow, but his eyes betrayed his concern. "Your Majesty, there is one more matter we must address. The mermaid." The king's heart skipped a beat. He had been avoiding the subject of the mermaid, of his mother, for days. Her presence, though ever present in the whispers of the wind, was not something he could face so easily. She was the source of his power, the reason for his existence, and the reason for his claim to the throne. But she was also a reminder of the curse that had shaped his life. "The mermaid," the king repeated, his voice tinged with unease. Tolu hesitated. "There are rumors that she is not content. That she has returned to the sea, angry and vengeful. They say she has sent a warning, one that no one dares ignore." The king stiffened. He had heard the stories, the whispers of his mother's fury. She had given him life, but she had also cursed him, cursed his father, cursed his bloodline. The mermaid's power was not something to be taken lightly, and the boy knew that if she was truly angry, there would be no stopping her. "I must speak with her," the king said, his decision clear. "I must understand what she wants, what she demands." Tolu's eyes widened with alarm. "Your Majesty, I must warn you. The mermaid is not someone to be trifled with. She is a force of nature, a being beyond our understanding. To seek her out is to risk everything." "I have nothing left to lose," the king said coldly. "I will face her, and I will settle this once and for all." Tolu opened his mouth to protest but thought better of it. The king's decision was final, and there was no convincing him otherwise. The king turned away from the balcony, his gaze fixed on the sea that lay beyond the city. The ocean stretched out before him, its waves crashing against the shore like the beating of his own heart. Somewhere beneath the depths, his mother, the mermaid, waited. And soon, he would face her. As he walked toward the chamber where his advisors had gathered, a thought gnawed at him. His father's legacy had led him here, but his own path would not be defined by Jabari's mistakes. He would carve his own way, no matter the cost. And so, with his decision made, the king prepared to face the ocean. It would not be a simple journey, and the consequences of his actions were unknown, but he was ready to face whatever awaited him. After all, he was the son of the mermaid, heir to the throne of Azarim, and he would not be swayed by fear. The sun had barely risen when the king left the palace behind, his determination set like stone. A small party of trusted guards accompanied him, but none knew the true purpose of the journey. They had been told only that their king sought answers, answers that could not be found in the palace. The journey to the sea was long, and the land was thick with the scent of rain and earth. As they neared the coast, the air grew heavy with the salt of the ocean, the winds picking up as though aware of their arrival. The king could feel the tension in the air, the knowledge that the mermaid was close, waiting for him. They reached the edge of a cliff that overlooked the endless expanse of water, the waves crashing against the rocks below with an intensity that seemed to echo the king's heart. It was here, at the edge of the world, that he would face his fate. "Your Majesty," one of the guards said quietly, "it is not safe to go further. The sea, it calls to you." The king ignored the warning, stepping closer to the edge of the cliff, his eyes searching the water below. There, in the depths, he knew she waited, his mother, the mermaid. "Come to me," the king called into the wind, his voice strong. "I seek your counsel, and I demand your answers." For a moment, there was nothing but the crashing of waves and the sigh of the wind. Then, as if summoned by his words, the water below began to churn, swirling in a hypnotic dance. The sea seemed to come alive, its surface shimmering with an eerie glow. And then, rising from the depths, a figure appeared. Her skin glowed with the light of the moon, her hair flowing like liquid silver. Her eyes, those eyes, burned with the fury of the sea, and her voice echoed through the air, carrying a weight that made the very earth tremble. "Jabari's son," she said, her voice as cold and deep as the ocean itself. "You seek answers, but you already know the truth. You are my son. And now, the sea will claim what is rightfully mine." The king stood tall, his gaze unwavering. "I came to face you, to understand the cost of my birth. But I will not let you claim my kingdom. Azurim is mine by blood. By right." The mermaid's laugh was like the roar of thunder. "Blood. Right. These words mean nothing. The throne you seek will never be yours. It was never meant to be." And with that, the sea rose higher, the waves crashing louder. The king felt the weight of his fate closing in. The journey he had begun had only just started, and it would take him to the deepest corners of the earth and beyond. The sea raged like an untamed beast. The king stood at the cliff's edge, feeling the pull of the ocean as if it were trying to drag him in. His heart pounded, but his resolve did not waver. He had come this far, and he was not about to back down now. "You speak of my destiny as though it's already decided," the king said, his voice cutting through the roar of the sea. "But I am the ruler of Azurim. I claim this throne, not you, not anyone else." The mermaid's eyes burned with a cold, unrelenting fury. Her voice rang out like the thunder that cracked across the sky. "You think you can defy me, mortal?" she asked, her form shimmering in the moonlight. "You were born of the ocean. You carry my blood within you. You owe me, boy." The king's hands clenched into fists. "I owe you nothing. You gave me life, yes, but you also cursed me. You cursed my bloodline, my people. My father's arrogance destroyed the very foundation of this kingdom. You did that. You set this course in motion." The mermaid's expression softened for a moment, but it was a fleeting look. She lowered her voice, her tone laced with a mixture of sorrow and anger. "Your father's sins were not my doing, Jabari's son. His choices led him to me. But what you do now, that will determine the fate of your people, your kingdom, your bloodline." A chill ran down the king's spine. "And what do you want from me? What do you expect me to do?" "I want nothing more than to see Azurim return to its rightful place, beneath the waves where it once belonged," the mermaid replied, her voice like the tide, rising and falling in waves. "But your heart is not like your father's. You are young, filled with pride and ambition. You want to prove yourself. But there is no throne that can withstand the weight of your arrogance. I will not allow the sea to claim Azurim," the king said, his voice firm with resolve. "I will prove that I can rule, not by magic or by blood, but by the strength of my people, by my choices." The mermaid's eyes darkened, her form beginning to shimmer with a faint, ethereal glow. "So be it," she said, her voice cold as ice. "You seek to rule. Then rule wisely. I will not make this easy for you. Remember that every choice you make now will lead to consequences beyond your understanding." Without another word, the mermaid vanished beneath the waves, her form slipping back into the depths of the ocean. The sea calmed almost immediately, as if acknowledging her departure. but the king knew better. Her warning still echoed in his mind. He turned back to his guards, who had watched the encounter in tense silence. They didn't know what had passed between him and the mermaid, but they could see the storm in his eyes. "Prepare the royal fleet," the king commanded, his voice a low growl. "I will return to Azerim. The kingdom will not fall. Not while I still breathe." Tolu stepped forward, his brow furrowed in concern. "Your Majesty, what did she say to you?" "The mermaid, what is her demand?" The king's gaze hardened. "She claims that I am bound to the sea, that my destiny is tied to it. She says that the throne of Azerim is hers to claim, that I am nothing more than a vessel for her will." Tolu's face darkened with worry. "But your Majesty, if the mermaid truly wishes to reclaim Azerim, then she may have the power to do so. You must tread carefully." "I will not bow to her," the king said, his voice resolute. "Azerim belongs to me now. I will find a way to break this curse." With those words, the king turned and began his journey back to the heart of Azerim, his mind racing with the implications of his encounter with the mermaid. He knew that what awaited him was far from a simple struggle for power. The true battle was just beginning. As the king's ship sailed back to Azerim, the skies above were heavy with clouds, dark and foreboding. The storm had passed, but its aftermath lingered, like the weight of the mermaid's words pressing down on the king's chest. He stood on the deck, staring out at the vast ocean, his thoughts consumed by the encounter. What had the mermaid meant by her words? What consequences would come from his defiance? He had always been taught that his bloodline was sacred, that his claim to the throne was unshakable. But now, with the mermaid's warning hanging over him like a dark cloud, he was unsure of what the future held. The sea was a powerful force, one that could not be controlled. He knew that now, more than ever. And yet, he could not let the ocean have control over his fate. He would fight for his kingdom, for his people, no matter what the mermaid demanded. When the ship finally docked at the royal harbor, the king was met with a chorus of cheers from the citizens of Azerim. They had heard of the storm, of the strange visitor who had arrived at the palace, but they didn't know the full story. They didn't know that their king was haunted by a curse, one that was tied to the very sea that surrounded their kingdom. As the king walked through the streets of Azerim, he was acutely aware of the eyes that followed him. The people loved their king, but they also feared him. His father's reputation still loomed large over the kingdom, and though the king had only just begun his rule, there were already whispers of doubt among the people. The palace seemed quieter than usual as the king entered the royal halls. The courtiers and advisors were gathered in the main chamber, awaiting his return. When the king entered, all eyes turned to him. "Your Majesty," Tolu said, bowing deeply. "We have heard of the storm, and we have awaited your command. The people are eager to know how you intend to address the challenges ahead." The king's gaze swept across the room. His advisors, loyal though they were, couldn't understand the full weight of the decisions he faced. The mermaid's warning still echoed in his ears, and he knew that the kingdom's future depended on what he did next. "I have spoken with the mermaid," the king said, his voice steady. "She claims that Azerim belongs to her. She says that I am cursed, that the throne was never meant for me. But I will not let her have what is mine." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Azerim will not fall. I will lead this kingdom with wisdom and strength. And I will break this curse, no matter the cost." The courtiers exchanged uncertain glances. The king's words were bold, but they were also filled with a certain desperation. His defiance of the mermaid, the very source of his power, could have dire consequences. Tolu stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "Your Majesty, there are many who believe that the mermaid's wrath will destroy us all. If you truly wish to break the curse, we must understand what she wants, what she demands. We must learn the secrets of the sea before it's too late." The king nodded. "I will seek out answers. I will not be swayed by fear. But I will not face this alone." With that, the king turned and left the chamber. He had a kingdom to lead, a curse to break, and a destiny to fulfill. And as the waves crashed against the shores of Azurim, he knew that his journey was far from over. The days following the king's return to Azurim were filled with uncertainty. Whispers spread like wildfire across the kingdom, carried by the winds of rumor and fear. The courtiers spoke in hushed tones, the people exchanged nervous glances, and even the sky seemed heavy with the weight of what was to come. King Jabari knew that to secure his throne, he would have to understand the true power of the sea, the mermaid, and the curse that had been cast upon him. But how could he defeat something as ancient and all-encompassing as the ocean itself? He stood on the balcony of his palace, gazing out at the vast expanse of water that stretched beyond the horizon. The sea seemed to whisper to him, a murmur that could barely be heard above the sounds of the bustling city. It was as though it had a life of its own, beckoning him to dive deeper into its mysteries. In the days that followed, the king sought counsel from the wisest of his advisors, and it was the elder Meremba, a woman with knowledge of the old ways, who spoke of a path that could lead him to the answers he sought. "There is an ancient temple," Meremba said one evening, her voice low and mysterious, hidden deep within the heart of the jungle. "It is said to be a place of great power, where the spirits of the ocean and the sky speak to those who dare to listen. There, you may find the answers you need, my king." The king's interest peaked. "A temple? And you believe it holds the answers to the curse?" "I do not know," Meremba replied, her eyes flickering with something more than doubt. "But it is said that only those who truly seek the truth will find what they are looking for. The journey will be perilous, and many have perished before reaching it. But if you are willing, you may discover the secrets of the sea, the curse, and your destiny." The king's mind raced. He had no time to waste. The mermaid's words still echoed in his ears, a constant reminder that his claim to the throne was anything but secure. If he were to break the curse and reclaim his power, he had to find the temple. He had to learn the truth. "I will go," King Jabari declared, his voice steady with resolve. "Prepare the journey. We leave at once." The news of the king's decision spread quickly, and soon, the streets of Azurim were abuzz with rumors of his quest. The people were both frightened and hopeful, unsure whether the king's boldness would lead to salvation or ruin. The next day, Jabari stood before the gates of the palace, his royal cloak billowing in the wind. His guards stood at attention, their faces masked with concern. Tolu, his most trusted advisor, stood beside him. "Your Majesty," Tolu said, his voice low, "this journey is fraught with danger. You are the last hope of Azurim. Please, be cautious." King Jabari met his gaze, a flicker of doubt crossing his features before he masked it with determination. "I have no choice, Tolu. I must break this curse, whatever it takes." With that, the king and his party set off into the jungle, a group of 10 armed men and women, all sworn to protect him. The dense trees and thick underbrush quickly swallowed them as they journeyed deeper into the heart of the land, leaving the kingdom behind. For days, they traveled through the uncharted wilderness, the air thick with humidity and the constant buzz of insects. The jungle was alive with sound, bird calls, rustling leaves, and the distant roar of wild animals. But amidst all this, the king felt a strange calm settle over him. It was as if the jungle itself was guiding him, pushing him forward toward the temple. One evening, as the sun began to set and the sky turned a brilliant shade of orange, they reached a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient stone structure, covered in vines and moss. The temple was unlike anything the king had ever seen, its architecture twisted and otherworldly. It seemed to pulse with an energy of its own, a power that was both ancient and untamed. "This is it," Meremba whispered, her eyes wide with awe. "The Temple of the Ocean." King Jabari stepped forward, his heart racing. The moment he crossed the threshold of the temple, he felt a surge of energy course through him. It was as if the very earth beneath his feet was alive, and the air around him hummed with a strange power. Inside the temple, the walls were adorned with intricate carvings, depictions of the sea, the sky, and creatures that seemed to swim between the two. In the center of the temple was a large pool of water, its surface still and dark, reflecting the light of the torches that lined the walls. Miremba approached the pool and knelt beside it. "This is the source," she said softly. "It is said that the spirits of the ocean will appear to those who seek them here. You must ask the right questions, King Jabari, if you wish to find the answers you seek." The king stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the pool. He could see nothing but the reflection of his own face, pale and drawn in the still water. But then, something shifted beneath the surface. The water rippled, and a figure began to emerge. At first, it was just a shadow, but then it became clearer, a woman, her form glowing with an ethereal light. Her skin shimmered like the surface of the sea, and her eyes burned with the same fiery intensity that Jabari had seen in the mermaid. It was her, the mermaid. "You have come," she said, her voice echoing through the temple. "You have come to ask for my help, to break the curse that binds you. But know this, mortal, there is a price to pay for everything. Even for your throne." King Jabari felt a cold chill run down his spine, but he did not flinch. "I am here to ask the truth," he said, his voice steady. "Tell me how I can break the curse. Tell me what I must do." The mermaid's eyes gleamed with a knowing smile. "You wish to undo the consequences of your arrogance, but what you seek may not be what you truly need. The curse can only be broken when you understand the balance between pride and humility. You must confront your past and the choices that led you here, for only then will the path be clear." The king's heart pounded in his chest. The mermaid's words were cryptic, but they were clear enough. He had to confront his past, his mistakes, his arrogance, and only then could he hope to find a way to break the curse. But as the mermaid began to fade back into the depths of the pool, her final words echoed in the king's mind. "Remember, Jabari, the ocean never forgets." The moon hung high in the sky, casting its soft silver light upon the jungle. The air was thick with the scents of damp earth and night-blooming flowers. The stone walls of the ancient temple were silent, as if holding their breath, waiting for King Jabari to come to terms with the revelation that had been laid before him. The mermaid's cryptic words echoed in his mind, a constant hum that threatened to drown out his thoughts. The ocean never forgets. What did she mean by that? What price would he have to pay to break the curse? And what past was he supposed to confront? He stood motionless in the center of the temple, staring at the still, dark water where the mermaid had disappeared. His heart raced in his chest, the weight of his past actions pressing down on him like an unbearable burden. His arrogance, his treatment of the mermaid, his disregard for the consequences of his actions, all of it had led to this moment. Tolu, ever watchful, approached the king cautiously. "Your Majesty, are you well?" he asked, his voice low. Jabari turned to face him, his expression unreadable. "I must face the past, Tolu," he said, his voice filled with determination. "I cannot escape it any longer." Tolu nodded, though his eyes were filled with concern. "But, sire, the curse, how will you break it?" The mermaid spoke of balance, of humility. "We have come this far, but what lies ahead?" "I don't know," the king replied, his voice softening. "But I must find out. I cannot rule with a hollow heart. I cannot be a king if I am not whole. I will face what I've done, no matter the cost." As they left the temple and began the long journey back to Azarim, Jabari's thoughts were consumed with the mermaid's words. The ocean never forgets. He could feel the weight of her gaze upon him, as if she were watching from the depths, waiting for him to take the first step toward redemption. Back in the kingdom, the storm had passed, but the unrest remained. The people of Azarim were on edge, their once loyal king now a subject of whispers and fear. The rumor of a mysterious boy, who had arrived with the storm, was all anyone could talk about. It was said that the boy had eyes that mirrored Jabari's own, a strange and unsettling reflection that had caused even the king's most trusted advisors to question their loyalty. King Jabari returned to the palace in the dead of night, the shadows of the walls long and stretched out as if the very stones were filled with secrets. He made his way to the inner chambers, where he found his wives waiting, their expressions tense. The royal court was not a place for silence, and Jabari had become a shadow of his former self. His once proud posture was now hunched, his face gaunt with exhaustion. "My king," his first wife, Amina, said softly, "you have returned. But you are changed. What has happened to you?" Jabari did not answer immediately. He turned to face the large mirror in the room, his reflection staring back at him, a man broken by his own hubris, standing at the crossroads of his future. A deep sigh escaped his lips as he turned away from the mirror and addressed his wives. "I have seen the truth," he said, his voice filled with quiet resolve. "I have learned that pride and arrogance have led me to the edge of ruin. And the ocean never forgets." Amina exchanged a worried glance with the others, her brow furrowing. "What does that mean, my king?" she asked cautiously. "You speak as though you have seen something terrible." "I have," Jabari replied. "I have learned that the curse that binds me can only be broken when I confront my past. When I understand what I have done and seek redemption." His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of what he was about to reveal. His wives were silent, waiting for him to continue. They had always known that their king's pride had been his greatest weakness, but they had never imagined that it would bring about such consequences. "I must find the boy," Jabari continued. "The one who came with the storm. His eyes, they are like mine. He is my son." The words hit like a thunderclap. Amina's eyes widened in shock, her hand instinctively reaching for her throat. "Your son," she whispered, unable to believe what she had just heard. "Yes," the king said, his voice low and solemn. "The mermaid sent him to claim what is hers, the throne. And I must meet him, confront the reality of my actions. I must face the consequences of abandoning her." The next day, King Jabari summoned the boy to the palace, his heart heavy with the knowledge of what he was about to face. As the child entered the throne room, Jabari was struck by the striking resemblance to himself. The boy's dark skin, the same rich brown as Jabari's own, and the eyes, those eyes that mirrored the depths of the sea, as if the ocean itself had returned to claim what was rightfully hers. The boy stood before the king, his posture straight, his expression calm but determined. He was no more than 12 years old, but there was an oldness to him, an ancient wisdom that seemed to radiate from his very being. "You are my son," Jabari said, his voice thick with emotion. "The son of the mermaid. The one I abandoned." The boy nodded, his eyes filled with the deep sorrow of the ocean. "I am Azura's son. And I have come to claim what is mine, the throne of Azurim. You took from my mother, and now it is time to return what was stolen." Jabari's heart wrenched in his chest. He had stolen from the mermaid, taken her without a thought, and cast her aside. And now, her son stood before him, demanding what was rightfully his. "You are right," the king said, his voice barely a whisper. "I took from her, and I left her broken. I have no excuse. But I will not allow the throne to be taken by force. If you truly are my son, then you must prove it. You must show me that you understand what it means to rule, not with pride, but with humility." The boy's gaze did not waver. "And if I do not prove myself worthy," he asked. "Then you will never rule," Jabari replied firmly. "You will understand the burden of power, the weight of a kingdom, and only then will I allow you to take the throne." As the king and the boy stood face to face, the tension in the room grew thick. The fate of Azurim hung in the balance, and King Jabari knew that this moment would define everything. His journey toward redemption, the breaking of the curse, and the future of the kingdom all rested on the outcome of this fateful meeting. But what would happen next? Could Jabari truly redeem himself and restore balance to the kingdom? Or would the weight of his past actions be too much to bear? The air in the throne room felt charged, as if the very walls were holding their breath. King Jabari stood before the boy, his heart pounding in his chest. The silence between them seemed endless, each second stretching like an eternity. The boy's unwavering gaze locked with his, the sea in his eyes deep and unfathomable, carrying with it the weight of the ocean's ancient wisdom. "I am not here to claim your throne by force, King Jabari," the boy said, his voice calm but filled with the same unshakable strength that had marked the mermaid's words. "I have come to test you. To test your heart. For the ocean does not take its toll lightly." Jabari swallowed hard, the knot in his throat tight. He had expected this, yet nothing could have prepared him for the moment he was now facing. His son, his flesh and blood, stood before him, bearing the power of the ocean in his very being, and Jabari knew he had to prove himself worthy. "The ocean will never forget," the boy continued, his eyes narrowing as if he could see through the king's soul. "It remembers everything, the betrayal, the abandonment, the arrogance. But it also remembers those who seek redemption. It is not too late for you, King Jabari. But you must prove you have learned what it means to be a man." The king's breath hitched. "How do I prove myself to you?" Jabari asked, his voice rough, stripped of the arrogance that had once defined him. The boy stepped forward, his feet barely making a sound on the cold stone floor. His eyes glinted like the darkest depths of the ocean, mysterious and unyielding. "You must face the trials of the sea, King Jabari. Only through those trials can you prove you are worthy to rule, worthy to claim the heart of your people, and worthy to right the wrongs you have committed." Jabari's mind raced. The trials of the sea were legendary, spoken of in hushed tones by the elders of Azerim. Few had ever survived them, let alone succeeded. They were not mere tests of strength, but of spirit, heart, and the very essence of who a man was. "I will face them," Jabari declared, his voice filled with determination. "I will prove myself. For my kingdom, for my people, and for my son." The boy's lips curled into a small smile, one that seemed both knowing and somber. "Then come with me, King Jabari. The sea is waiting." The following dawn was thick with fog, the palace shrouded in an eerie silence. King Jabari, now stripped of his royal finery and dressed in simple clothes, stood at the edge of the kingdom's shores. The winds were calm, the sea unusually still, as though holding its breath in anticipation. The boy stood beside him, his eyes reflecting the light of the rising sun, and his presence seemed to merge with the very land and sea around them. "The first trial is one of humility," the boy said, his voice carrying on the wind. "You must enter the water, face the depths of the ocean, and confront your own reflection. The sea will show you who you truly are, beyond the crown, beyond the arrogance. It will reveal to you the men you have become." Jabari stood at the water's edge, staring into the vast expanse of the ocean. The waves lapped gently at his feet, their rhythmic sound a soft reminder of the sea's eternal power. His heart raced, and for the first time in years, he felt small, vulnerable. He had always been the prince, the king, the ruler, but now, in the face of the ocean, he was nothing. Just a man, seeking redemption. With a deep breath, Jabari stepped into the water. The coldness of the sea sent a shock through his body, but he did not hesitate. He waded deeper, his feet sinking into the soft sand beneath him, the water rising higher and higher until it reached his waist. The water seemed to swirl around him, pulling at him as though it had a mind of its own, urging him to go further. The boy remained on the shore, watching with a distant, knowing look in his eyes. "You must face the ocean, King Jabari," he called out. "It is not the water you fear, but what it reveals." The deeper Jabari waded, the more intense the feeling became. The water swirled around him, tugging at him like an invisible hand, guiding him into the heart of the sea. Suddenly, the world around him seemed to shift. The sounds of the world above faded away, and in the stillness, the water became like a mirror, reflecting not just his face but his very soul. Jabari gazed into the depths, and there, in the water, he saw himself. But this reflection was not the proud, powerful king he had once been. Instead, he saw a man, a broken man, lost in his own pride and arrogance. He saw the hurt in his eyes, the selfishness that had caused him to abandon the mermaid, the cruelty with which he had treated her. He saw the emptiness that had followed him throughout his life, a gaping void where humility and compassion should have been. The ocean's reflection showed him all his sins, laid bare before him. The guilt of abandoning the mermaid, of taking without understanding, of acting without thought for the consequences. The truth was overwhelming, and Jabari felt the weight of it crush him. "I have been a fool," he whispered, his voice breaking. "A foolish, arrogant fool." As he spoke, the water seemed to swirl and bubble, the waves rising in response to his words. The sea was alive, and it listened. The boy's voice echoed in his ears, "The first trial is complete, King Jabari. You have seen the truth of your heart. The ocean has shown you who you truly are." But Jabari could feel no relief. The weight of his past still clung to him, heavy and unyielding. He could not escape it, no matter how hard he tried. "Now, you must prove you are capable of change," the boy said, his voice soft but firm. "The second trial will test your resolve. You must leave behind the men you were and embrace the men you can become." Jabari's heart pounded in his chest. Could he truly change? Could he be the man the kingdom needed him to be, the father his son deserved? He had come so far, but the road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges that would test not only his strength but his very soul. And so, with the weight of his past pressing heavily upon him, Jabari began the second trial, the trial of transformation. As the sun sank beneath the horizon, casting the sea in hues of crimson and gold, Jabari stood before the boy once more. His heart still heavy, his spirit torn, but the first steps had been taken. The trials were far from over, and the road to redemption was long. But Jabari knew one thing for certain: he would face whatever came next. For his kingdom. For his son. And most of all, for himself. The night sky was heavy with stars, a blanket of celestial lights casting their glow over the quiet shores of Azerim. The air was thick with the scent of salt water, and the rhythmic crashing of the waves against the rocks was the only sound that dared disturb the silence. King Jabari stood at the edge of the ocean, facing the boy, his son, who seemed as much a part of the sea as the waves themselves. "Transformation," the boy had said, his voice carrying the weight of the ocean's eternal wisdom. "To prove you have truly learned, you must first confront your past, then renounce it. Only by doing this can you become a man worthy of your crown." Jabari's heart was heavy, his mind clouded with uncertainty. He had seen his reflection in the water, seen the arrogance and cruelty that had shaped his life. He had accepted it, but could he truly let go of everything he had been? The crown, the power, the pride, all of it had been his life, his identity. Could he abandon the very things that had defined him for so long? The boy's eyes gleamed with a mixture of patience and challenge, as though he could read every doubt that flickered across Jabari's heart. "You are not the man you were, King Jabari. But only you can choose whether to change." The words were simple, yet they held a truth that burned like fire. Jabari had spent his entire life believing that strength was measured by power, by control, by dominance. He had been wrong. True strength came from humility, from compassion, from acknowledging one's mistakes and working to correct them. But was he capable of that? Could he truly change the course of his life? The boy stepped closer to the water, his feet leaving no mark on the soft sand beneath him. The sea does not forgive easily. But it also does not forget. It remembers those who show strength in their sorrow, those who rise after falling, and those who seek redemption. Jabari's breath caught in his chest. He had been a king, a warrior, but now he was just a man with the chance to prove that he could rise above the mistakes of his past. And so, he took a step forward, toward the water, toward the trials he knew would define the rest of his life. "Do not fear what lies ahead," the boy said softly. "The ocean will guide you. But first, you must leave behind all that you once were. All your pride. All your arrogance. Only then can you embrace what comes next." Jabari nodded, his heart heavy with the weight of the boy's words. He stepped into the water once more, this time with purpose. The cold waves rose around him, enveloping him as he waded deeper into the sea, feeling the weight of the ocean's power wash over him. The further he went, the more the world above seemed to fade, until there was only the sea, the boy, and the journey ahead. The boy's voice echoed in his mind, to transform is to be reborn. You must shed your old self like a serpent sheds its skin. And so, Jabari closed his eyes, breathing deeply as the water surrounded him. He felt it, the shift, the change. His old self, his arrogance, his pride, began to peel away, layer by layer, until all that was left was the core of who he truly was, a man, imperfect and flawed, but willing to change. The sea embraced him, not as a king, but as a soul seeking redemption. The water grew warmer, and a sense of peace settled over him. He opened his eyes, and there, floating before him, was the boy, his son, eyes glowing with a quiet understanding. In the boy's gaze, Jabari saw not judgment, but acceptance. It was as though the ocean itself had spoken, telling him that his transformation was not only possible, but necessary. Now, you must return to your kingdom, the boy said, his voice calm but firm. The trials are not yet over, but you have passed the first two. The third trial will test your heart. Jabari nodded, his heart full, not with the arrogance of a king, but with the quiet strength of a man who had begun the path of redemption. The sea had shown him who he truly was. Now, he must prove that he could live up to that truth. As the sun rose over Azarim, casting its golden light across the land, Jabari returned to his palace. The winds that had once seemed harsh now felt gentle, and the weight of his crown no longer pressed so heavily upon him. He knew that he still had much to prove, but for the first time in years, he felt hope stir within him. In the throne room, his wives stood in hushed silence, watching him with wary eyes. The whispers had grown louder in the kingdom, the doubts about his ability to rule and produce an heir. But Jabari did not seek their approval now. He no longer needed the validation of his people to know his worth. His journey was his own, and he would walk it, no matter where it led. Your Majesty, one of his wives, Queen Talia, spoke softly, her voice laced with concern. The kingdom is waiting for you. They are anxious for an heir. Jabari's gaze softened. He had failed them, but he would not fail them again. Not now, not after everything he had learned. I will give them an heir, he said, his voice steady and resolute. But I will not do so for my own glory. I will do so for the kingdom, for the future of Azarim. As he sat on his throne, the weight of his crown felt lighter than it ever had before. He had learned that true power did not lie in dominance, but in compassion. True strength came not from fear, but from love. And as he looked out over his kingdom, Jabari knew that the third trial awaited him, the trial of his heart. He had proven that he could change, but could he lead his people with the humility and wisdom they deserved? Could he embrace the love of a people who had doubted him, and the love of a son who had yet to trust him? The road ahead was long, and the trials would be many, but King Jabari was no longer the arrogant man who had once walked the earth with pride. He was a king reborn, a man who had learned the true meaning of strength. And as the winds of change swept across Azarim, Jabari knew that his journey was far from over. The early morning sun bathed the kingdom of Azarim in golden hues, casting long shadows across the palace grounds. The streets, usually bustling with the sounds of merchants and townsfolk, were quieter than usual, as the people of the kingdom felt the weight of uncertainty in the air. King Jabari's return from the sea had sparked whispers among the people, and though some looked upon him with new hope, others remained skeptical of his transformation. In the throne room, Jabari sat, his back straight, his eyes fixed on the grand doors before him. His heart still bore the echoes of the trials he had endured, the lessons learned from his past, but the third trial, the trial of his heart, loomed before him. Could he truly rule with love and humility, or would his old self rise again, demanding to be heard? Queen Talia entered the room, her presence commanding yet gentle. Her eyes, usually sharp and calculating, softened when they landed on Jabari. You look different, she said quietly, taking a step closer. There is a calmness in you that wasn't there before. Jabari nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. I have changed. But the hardest part is yet to come. Talia studied him for a moment, her brow furrowing. What do you mean? The third trial, Jabari said, his voice low. It is not just about me. It is about the kingdom. About them, our people. I must prove that I can lead them with more than just the strength of my crown. Her expression softened, but there was still a flicker of doubt in her eyes. You've always been a king who ruled with power, Jabari. But now, she hesitated. Now, you must prove you can rule with a heart open to all. Jabari's eyes darkened slightly, a shadow crossing his face. That is what I fear. I have led with pride, with arrogance, but I have never led with love. I must change that. But first, he paused, looking at the door that led outside to the kingdom. I must face the people. Talia nodded, though she seemed hesitant. They will follow you, Jabari, if you prove yourself worthy. But they need to see it, they need to see the men you are becoming. With a deep breath, Jabari rose from his throne. Then I will show them. The grand square of Azarim was filled with people from all corners of the kingdom, their faces a mix of hope and skepticism. Merchants stood behind their stalls, children played in the streets, and elders whispered among themselves. The palace guards, usually stern and unwavering, stood at attention, but even they seemed to sense the tension in the air. The kingdom was holding its breath, waiting for their king to step forward. Jabari walked out onto the balcony, the cool breeze tousling his hair. The crowd fell silent as his presence filled the square. They had seen him before, the arrogant prince who had demanded respect, the king who had ruled with strength and fear. But today, he was different. He stood tall, his heart pounding in his chest. The eyes of the kingdom were upon him, and this was his moment. This was his chance to prove that he had truly changed. My people, he began, his voice clear and strong, but there was a softness to it, a humility that had not been there before. I have come before you today, not as your king, but as one who seeks to lead you with a heart open to your needs, your desires, and your hopes. The crowd stirred, murmurs rippling through the gathered masses. Some were shocked, others skeptical, but all were listening. For too long, I have ruled with pride. For too long, I have sought to prove my strength, to command your respect. But I have come to understand that true strength is not found in dominance, nor in fear, but in love. Love for this kingdom, love for each of you, and love for the future we will build together. Jabari's gaze swept over the crowd, his eyes meeting those of the elders, the merchants, the children. I have wronged you, and I ask for your forgiveness. I will not hide behind my crown any longer. I will lead with humility, with care, and with the knowledge that I am not above you. We are all part of this kingdom, and together, we will rise. The silence that followed was heavy, as if the very air itself was holding its breath. The people were unsure of what to make of his words. Could it be true? Could this truly be the same Jabari who had once ruled with an iron fist? It was then that a voice rang out from the crowd, an old woman with silver hair and wise eyes. She stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. You speak of love, King Jabari. But love is not something that can be given with words alone. It must be shown through actions. Jabari nodded, his heart aching with the weight of her words. You are right, he said, his voice steady. Words alone will not change anything. But I promise you, I will show you my love through my actions. I will show you that I am worthy of your trust. The old woman studied him for a moment, her gaze unwavering. Then, slowly, she nodded. We will see, King Jabari. We will see. And with that, the crowd began to stir once more, some with hope, others with doubt, but all with a newfound curiosity. Jabari knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but he was no longer afraid. The third trial had begun, and he would face it with courage, with humility, and with a heart open to his people. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the kingdom in a warm, golden glow, Jabari returned to the palace, his heart heavy but hopeful. He had faced the people, but now he faced the greatest challenge of all, earning their trust, proving that his transformation was real, and showing that he could lead them with love. Queen Talia was waiting for him in the palace gardens, her gaze soft but knowing. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice quiet. Jabari sighed, his shoulders heavy. "I think they are beginning to believe me. But it will take time. Love is not easily given, and trust is even harder to earn." Talia stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "You have already taken the first step, Jabari. The hardest part is over. Now, you must prove yourself with every action you take." Jabari looked at her, his eyes filled with a quiet resolve. "I will, Talia. I will prove to them, and to myself, that I can be the king they deserve." And as the stars began to twinkle in the sky above, Jabari knew that the true trials were only just beginning. The road ahead was uncertain, and the future of Azarim was still shrouded in mystery. But with every step, Jabari would walk with love in his heart, determined to be the king his people needed. The moon hung low in the sky, casting its silvery light across the kingdom of Azarim. The stillness of the night was broken only by the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind. Yet, for King Jabari, there was no peace to be found in the quiet of his palace chambers. The trial of his heart was not something that could be solved in a day, nor was the path to redemption free from the trials of his past. Jabari stood before a large window, his gaze fixed on the stars that glittered above. They seemed so distant, so untouchable, much like the kingdom he had once ruled with an iron fist. Now, as the leader of Azarim, he felt the weight of his decisions more than ever. There was so much left to do, so much to prove. His transformation, though significant, had only just begun. And the voices of doubt, both from within and from the kingdom, still echoed in his mind. "Are you truly ready to change, Jabari?" he asked himself softly, his reflection staring back at him in the glass. "Or are you simply afraid of the consequences of your actions?" The sound of footsteps behind him caused him to turn. Talia entered the room, her eyes thoughtful, her expression softer than it had been in recent days. "I see the weight of the crown is heavy on your mind," she said gently, her voice a balm to his troubled soul. Jabari sighed, rubbing his hand over his face. "It's more than that, Talia. It's the weight of everything I've done. The choices I made, the people I hurt. I'm trying to change, but sometimes it feels like my past is too heavy to shake off." Talia stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Your past will always be a part of you, Jabari. But it does not define you. You have the power to shape your future, one choice at a time. You've already taken the first step by acknowledging your mistakes." "I don't know if that's enough," he admitted, his voice tinged with frustration. "I've hurt so many people, and even though I'm trying to do better, I can't help but feel like the damage is irreparable." Talia's eyes softened with understanding. "The road to redemption is never easy, Jabari. But it is worth it. The people of Azarim may not trust you yet, but they will see your actions over time. You must prove yourself not just with words, but with deeds." Jabari nodded, her words resonating deep within him. But as much as he wanted to believe in the possibility of redemption, there was one thing that gnawed at him, the young boy who had arrived at the palace, claiming to be his son. The storm within him was not only of doubt but of fear. "What about the boy?" Jabari asked, his voice heavy with uncertainty. "He claims to be my son. But how can that be true? I don't remember." Talia's expression hardened slightly. "We don't know the full truth yet. But you must face him, Jabari. If he is truly your son, you must acknowledge him. If not, we must find out who sent him and why. Either way, this mystery cannot remain unresolved." Jabari nodded solemnly. "I will meet him tomorrow." As the night deepened, Jabari found no rest. His mind was consumed with thoughts of the mysterious boy, the mermaid, and the choices he had made that had brought him to this point. The storm within his heart raged on, and though Talia's words offered comfort, they did little to ease the turmoil that churned inside him. The next day, a heavy storm rolled over the kingdom, dark clouds gathering overhead as if the heavens themselves were mourning the fate of Azarim. The winds howled, carrying the scent of rain and sea salt. The tension in the palace was palpable, as if every living soul in Azerim knew that something significant was about to unfold. Jabari stood at the entrance to the palace, his heart pounding as he awaited the boy's arrival. The air was thick with the scent of rain, and the distant rumble of thunder echoed in the sky. His pulse quickened as the gates opened, and a lone figure emerged from the shadows of the storm. The boy was no more than 15, with wild, dark hair and eyes that mirrored Jabari's own. His skin was dark, like the rich earth of Azerim, but his features were sharp, almost otherworldly, as if he carried the essence of the sea within him. His eyes were wide and intense, and his voice carried the weight of the ocean as he spoke. "My name is Sephiu," the boy said, his voice deep and steady, despite the storm. "My mother sent me to claim what is mine, the throne of Azerim." Jabari stared at him, his heart sinking. The words felt like a dagger to his chest. He had never laid eyes on this boy before, but there was something unmistakable about his presence. The connection between them was undeniable. "What do you mean?" Jabari asked, his voice strained. "Who is your mother? And why should I believe you?" Sephiu's gaze never wavered. "My mother is the one you wronged, the mermaid, Azira. She gave me life, and she sent me to claim what you denied her." Jabari's heart raced as a cold sweat broke out across his brow. Azira, the mermaid he had abandoned. She had come to him once, and he had cast her aside in his arrogance. Now, this boy stood before him, claiming to be her son, and the weight of his actions bore down on him more heavily than ever. You are her son?" Jabari whispered, his voice trembling. Sephiu nodded solemnly. "Yes. And I have come to claim what is rightfully mine. The throne of Azerim." The wind howled louder, and the storm outside seemed to grow more violent as the truth sank in. Jabari stood frozen, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and regret. He had thought his past was behind him, but now it had come crashing back in full force. "Why should I believe you?" Jabari asked, his voice harsh, but the doubt in his eyes was clear. "How do I know you are not lying?" Sephiu's expression softened. "I have no proof other than my blood and the truth of my mother's words. She told me you would doubt me, but I must stand here and say it anyway. I am your son, Jabari. And I will not leave until I have what is mine." The words struck Jabari like a thunderclap, and for the first time, he saw the weight of his actions in full. He had hurt Azira, abandoned her, and now her son stood before him, demanding justice. But the storm was far from over. The boy's words, as fierce as the wind and as deep as the sea, were only the beginning. Jabari had much to face, and the trials were far from finished. As the storm raged on outside, Jabari was faced with a choice. Would he accept the consequences of his past and acknowledge this boy as his son, or would he reject him, as he had once rejected Azira? The decision was his, and it would determine the future of Azerim. But one thing was clear: the trials were far from over, and the kingdom was about to face a storm unlike any they had ever known. The storm outside showed no signs of abating. The winds howled like wolves in the night, their cries rising above the crackling of thunder. The tension inside the palace mirrored the tempest outside, and Jabari felt like he was caught in the middle of a fierce battle, a battle that threatened to consume him entirely. He stood face to face with Sephiu, the boy who claimed to be his son. The weight of the boy's words lingered in the air, thick with an undeniable truth. Jabari's heart raced, his mind struggling to make sense of the reality unfolding before him. Azira, the mermaid, had sent this boy to claim the throne of Azerim, his throne. Sephiu, with his striking resemblance to Jabari, seemed as unyielding as the storm itself. His presence was powerful, an embodiment of the ocean's depth and fury, and Jabari could not deny the pull of connection between them. Yet, doubts clouded his thoughts. How could he accept the boy as his son? He had never once thought of the consequences of his past actions, nor had he considered the far-reaching ripples of his cruelty toward Azira. "Tell me more," Jabari demanded, his voice rough, struggling to remain steady. What do you want from me? Why are you here now? Sefiu's eyes burned with intensity as he spoke. I am here to claim my birthright. Azira, my mother, was cast aside by you, abandoned and humiliated. You thought you could escape your sin, but it has come back to haunt you, Jabari. The sea never forgets. My mother never forgets. And now, I am here to remind you of that. Jabari took a deep breath, the storm's fury mirrored in his heart. Azira, she warned me, he whispered, more to himself than to the boy before him. She told me that there would be consequences, but I was too proud, too arrogant to listen. The memories of that night, the night he had forced himself upon Azira by the hidden waterfall, flooded his mind. He had laughed in her face as she vanished into the water, her eyes full of fury, and her curse had followed him ever since. You can't undo what's been done, Sefiu continued, his voice like the rolling waves crashing against the shore. But you can face the consequences. You can face me. Jabari's heart twisted in his chest. The boy's words, sharp as the jagged rocks that lined the shores of Azurim, cut through him like a dagger. What was it that made Sefiu so sure? What did he expect from Jabari? I've come to claim the throne, Sefiu said again, his tone resolute. I do not seek your approval. I only seek what is mine by right. But I will not do it through force. I will do it with the truth. Jabari stared at the boy, his thoughts swirling like the winds outside. What truth? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. What truth can you possibly offer that could change what I've done? Sefiu stepped forward, his eyes locked on Jabari's. The truth is that I am not just a son of Azira. I am also a son of Azurim. And it is this kingdom, your kingdom, that I have come to claim. I will bring the strength of the sea, the wisdom of the merfolk, and the power of the tides to restore balance to Azurim. Jabari's breath caught in his throat. His heart raced as the boy's words sank in. This was not just about revenge. This was about something much greater. The boy, his son, was offering more than just a claim to the throne. He was offering to bring Azurim into a new age, one where the sea's power would be recognized, and the past could finally be confronted. But Jabari was no fool. He knew that accepting Sefiu would not be an easy path. The people of Azurim had long held to their traditions, and the idea of a mermaid's child taking the throne was something they could never accept. There would be rebellion. There would be bloodshed. Do you think the people of Azurim will accept you? Jabari asked, his voice filled with doubt. Do you think they will welcome a son of the sea to rule over them? Sefiu's gaze softened, but his resolve remained firm. I don't expect them to welcome me with open arms, no. But I will make them see the truth. I will show them that Azurim's future lies in the sea, just as much as it lies on the land. Jabari looked at the boy, the weight of his own failures pressing down on him. The years of arrogance, the years of thinking he was above the consequences, had led him to this moment. This was the moment where he would either face his past or continue to live in denial. I am your father, Jabari said, his voice hoarse. I don't know how to make amends for what I've done, but I will try. I will not abandon you like I abandoned her. I will not let the kingdom destroy itself because of my pride. Sefiu's expression softened, though his eyes still held a quiet intensity. I do not ask for your forgiveness, Jabari. I only ask that you face the truth and help me take my rightful place. Jabari nodded, the storm inside him beginning to subside, if only for a moment. He had taken the first step toward redemption. But the road ahead was far from easy. Tomorrow, Jabari said, his voice steadying. We will go to the people. We will face them together. Sefiu smiled, his eyes gleaming with a quiet satisfaction. Then we begin the journey of truth. The next morning, the palace buzzed with an unusual sense of urgency. Word of the storm that had passed through the night had spread quickly, but it was not the storm that people whispered about. It was the arrival of the boy, the mysterious young man who had claimed the throne as his birthright. Jabari stood before the grand throne room, his mind heavy with the weight of the decisions that lay ahead. He had lived his life for power, for control, but now he realized that true power lay in the truth. The truth of his actions. The truth of the sea. And the truth of his son. Talia stood by his side, her presence a quiet strength. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, her voice low. Jabari looked at her, his expression solemn. "I must be. There is no turning back now." With a deep breath, Jabari entered the throne room, Sefiu by his side. The whispers of the courtiers fell silent as they saw the two figures enter, the young boy standing tall and confident beside the king. The tension in the room was palpable, but Jabari felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in his life, he was facing the truth. "My people," Jabari began, his voice steady, "I stand before you with the truth. I have wronged many, including those I love. But I will not hide from it anymore. This boy," he gestured to Sefiu, "is my son. He is the heir to the throne of Azarim, and together, we will lead this kingdom into a new era." The murmurs in the room grew louder. The courtiers exchanged looks of disbelief and confusion. But Jabari stood tall, his eyes unwavering. The storm was far from over. But as Jabari looked to his son, he realized that the winds of change had already begun to blow. The air inside the throne room was thick with uncertainty. Jabari stood at the center, his eyes steady but his heart pounding as the courtiers murmured among themselves. He could feel their doubts, their fear, but he knew there was no turning back now. The moment of truth had arrived, and it was time for Azarim to face its reckoning. Sefiu, his son, stood beside him, unwavering, a stark contrast to the anxiety that gripped the king. The boy's presence was like a calm before the storm, a stillness that only added to the tension. With each passing moment, the weight of the decision Jabari had made seemed heavier, but there was no way to undo it. This was the path they were on now. "My king," one of the elder courtiers, Mermaid, spoke up, his voice cautious but laced with authority. "This is unprecedented. The idea of a child of the sea ruling over Azarim is not something our people will accept easily. There will be unrest." Jabari's gaze never faltered as he addressed Mermaid. "You are right, Mermaid," he said, his voice steady but firm. "This will not be easy. But I have spent too long turning away from the truth, from the consequences of my actions. It is time we face the past and the future together." The room fell into silence, the courtiers unsure how to respond. Jabari knew that the path ahead would be fraught with resistance. Azarim's people were proud, bound by tradition and heritage. The idea of a mermaid's child on the throne was an abomination in their eyes, and many would likely see it as an insult to their way of life. But Jabari was no longer the arrogant prince who had once lived for power alone. He had seen the cost of his pride, and now, he was ready to pay the price. "We must hold a council," Jabari said, his voice commanding. "We will present the truth to the people of Azarim. They must understand the full story, what I have done, what Sefiu represents, and what our kingdom must become." Sefiu spoke then, his voice calm but powerful. "I do not seek your forgiveness or your acceptance. I seek only the truth. The sea has called to me, and it is through the sea that Azarim's future lies. If you wish to see this kingdom survive, you will have to embrace that truth." Jabari could feel the weight of Sefiu's words settle heavily in the room. The courtiers exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared to speak out against the prince or the king. It was clear that Jabari had made a decision, one that would change the course of Azarim forever. Mermaid stepped forward, his voice filled with a mixture of respect and doubt. "And what of the people, your majesty? What of the tribes who live by the old ways? What of the elders who speak against such a union between the land and the sea?" Jabari's heart ached as he considered the question. He had once been one of those who upheld the old ways, who believed that the purity of the land must remain untainted by the sea's influence. But now, he understood that to cling to the old ways was to resist the tide of change that was inevitable. "They will resist," Jabari said, his voice tinged with sorrow. But the resistance will only make us stronger. We cannot build a future on the foundation of lies and secrets. The truth must be revealed. Sefiu nodded, his eyes calm and unwavering. And when the truth is revealed, they will have no choice but to accept it. The sea always finds its way to the shore. Jabari turned to the throne, his mind filled with the memories of his past. His life had been marked by pride, arrogance, and a desire for control. He had forced Azira, abandoned her, and now, her son stood before him, demanding the throne that was rightfully his. Jabari had wronged the sea, but he was determined to make things right. He would face the consequences, and together, he and Sefiu would show the people of Azurim what true strength was. As the days passed, the preparations for the council began. Word spread quickly across the kingdom, and the people of Azurim gathered in anticipation, unsure of what to expect. The air was thick with tension as the streets filled with whispers and rumors. Would the king truly pass the throne to this stranger, this child of the sea? The council was held in the grand hall of the palace, where the king would address the people of Azurim. Jabari stood at the front, with Sefiu by his side. The crowd filled the hall, their eyes filled with suspicion and curiosity. The elders, the warriors, and the merchants of Azurim were all present, their faces tense, their arms crossed in defiance. Jabari raised his hand, signaling for silence. The murmurs of the crowd died down, and the room fell into an expectant hush. "My people," Jabari began, his voice strong but carrying the weight of the years. "I stand before you today with a truth that I have long ignored. I have wronged many, and now I must face the consequences of my actions." He turned to Sefiu, who stood beside him, calm and composed. "This is Sefiu," Jabari continued, his voice steady. "He is my son. He is the heir to the throne of Azurim, and he comes not as an enemy but as a son of this land. His mother, Azira, is of the sea, and it is through the sea that Azurim's future lies." The crowd erupted in whispers, their disbelief palpable. Jabari's heart raced as he watched the reaction of his people. This would not be easy, he knew that. But he was determined to see it through. "Azira," Jabari continued, "was cast aside by me, and for that, I carry a great burden. But Sefiu, his mother's son, has come to claim his birthright. I have wronged the sea, and now I must make amends. The truth must be known, and the future of Azurim must be embraced, not feared." The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, and Jabari could feel the uncertainty rising. But he stood firm, refusing to back down. Sefiu spoke then, his voice strong and clear, like the crashing waves outside. "The sea never forgets," he said, his words carrying weight. "It is the source of life, and it will not be denied. Azurim's future lies in the sea, just as much as it lies on the land. It is time for change." The people of Azurim listened in stunned silence, and Jabari could feel the tension in the air. This was the moment that would shape their future. Would they accept the truth, or would they turn away, bound by their fear of the unknown? The storm outside had passed, but the storm within Azurim was just beginning. The night stretched long as the storm within the palace grew. Despite the raging thunder outside, there was a stillness in the air, an ominous calm before the true battle began. The council hall had fallen silent after Sefiu's declaration. Jabari stood beside his son, feeling a bitter taste in his mouth as the reality of what he had set in motion began to sink in. The weight of the crown, once a symbol of power, now felt unbearably heavy. The murmurs from the crowd echoed like a distant rumble of thunder, their distrust palpable, their faces filled with confusion and skepticism. Jabari knew that this would not be an easy journey. His kingdom had always been governed by traditions, by strict rules set in place long before his reign. A son of the sea, an entity that many in the kingdom viewed with fear and suspicion, was not a king's heir in their eyes. The land and the sea had always been separate, and now Jabari was asking them to accept the impossible. Sefiu's words had shaken the foundations of their beliefs. But as the prince stood in his place, resolute, Jabari realized that there was no turning back. This was the moment when Azurim would either rise to face the future, or be crushed under the weight of its own traditions. "Father," Sefiu's voice broke through Jabari's thoughts, low but firm. "Do not fear their whispers. The truth will win, as it always does." Jabari looked at his son, his gaze filled with both pride and sorrow. He had made a mistake in his youth, one he could never undo, but now, he could see that Sefiu was right. His son was strong, unyielding, and would carry the weight of this kingdom with wisdom beyond his years. But that was not enough. The people of Azurim would have to see it too. They would have to understand that this was not about pride, about who had the right to rule. This was about survival. "I will speak to them," Jabari said, his voice a low rumble. "I will make them see what I see. That this is the only way forward." The days that followed the council were filled with tension. The kingdom buzzed with unrest. The streets were alive with the rumors and whispers of the common folk, the traders, and the soldiers. Some spoke in hushed voices of Jabari's betrayal, of his fall from grace. Others were fearful of the future. What would happen to Azurim if the sea claimed the throne? Would the kingdom still be the land of strength and pride they had always known? Jabari knew that convincing his people would not be easy. His arrogance, his cruelty in the past, had earned him many enemies. And yet, as king, he had also earned their respect. Now, he had to ask for their trust, to ask them to follow a path they had never imagined. But there was no other choice. Jabari made his way to the grand temple on the outskirts of Azurim, where the eldest of the elders, Adebayo, resided. The temple was a place of great reverence, where the wisdom of the past lived within the stone walls and the ancient carvings. It was where the elders had gathered for centuries to keep the spirit of Azurim alive, to maintain its traditions and ensure its strength. It was also where they would pass judgment. Adebayo sat before the sacred fire, the glow of the flames reflecting off his wizened face. His eyes, sharp despite his age, bore into Jabari as the king entered, his footsteps heavy with the weight of his decision. "You seek guidance, my king." Adebayo's voice was calm, but it carried an underlying tension. "Or do you seek permission?" Jabari stepped forward, kneeling before the elder in a rare display of humility. "I seek neither, Elder Adebayo. I seek only to do what is right for Azurim." The elder's brow furrowed, and he gazed at the fire for a long moment, as if contemplating Jabari's words. The silence between them was thick with the gravity of the situation. "You know the people," Adebayo said finally, his voice heavy with wisdom. "They will not forgive you easily, nor will they forget your past. You have cast aside the old ways, and now you ask them to follow a son of the sea. Do you truly think they will accept him?" Jabari did not hesitate. "I have made my mistakes, and I will face the consequences. But Sefiu is more than just a child of Azira. He is my son, and he is worthy of the throne. If Azurim is to survive, we must move forward. We cannot cling to the past." The elder's eyes flickered with a mix of doubt and recognition. He knew the struggle that lay ahead, but he also saw the truth in Jabari's words. The kingdom could not remain stagnant forever, not when the winds of change were already upon them. "The people will test him," Adebayo said finally, his voice low. "They will seek to tear him down, to remind you both of his origins. But you must show them that strength is not defined by blood alone. It is defined by one's ability to lead, to protect, and to build a future." Jabari stood up, his heart burning with determination. "I will do whatever it takes, Elder. Azurim will survive. We will survive." The following weeks saw a nation on the brink of chaos. The palace was filled with tension as whispers spread throughout the kingdom. The people were divided. Some called for Jabari to abdicate the throne and allow Sefiu to claim his birthright, while others called for his death, unable to accept a king born of the sea. It was a war of ideologies, and it was playing out in the streets. But Jabari did not back down. He continued to stand beside Sefiu, showing the people that he believed in his son, that he believed in the future they could build together. It was not easy, There were riots, protests, and even assassination attempts, but Jabari and Sephu stood firm. They had nothing to fear. Then, one day, as the wind shifted and the sky darkened, a figure appeared at the palace gates. The people gasped as the figure made their way toward the throne room, Azira, the mermaid. She was just as Jabari remembered her, her beauty as breathtaking as ever. But this time, there was no anger in her eyes, no hatred. Instead, there was something else, an understanding, perhaps even forgiveness. She approached Jabari and Sephu, her voice like the soft crash of waves against the shore. "It is time, my son," she said to Sephu. "The sea calls for you." Jabari watched in awe as Sephu stepped forward, his eyes locked on Azira's. This was it, the moment of truth. The moment when everything would change. Azira raised her hand, and the waters within the palace seemed to ripple. The walls seemed to tremble as the sea's power surged through the air. The future of Azarim was no longer in question. The room trembled under the weight of Azira's presence, her form shimmering as though she were made of the water itself, every movement a reflection of the vast ocean beyond. Sephu, standing before her, felt a strange pull, as though his very soul was being summoned by the deep waters that had given him life. Jabari watched, his heart heavy, unsure of what would come next. Azira's gaze, filled with ancient wisdom, settled on Sephu. "You are no longer just a prince, Sephu. You are the son of the sea, the heir to two worlds." Her voice was gentle, but there was a power behind it that made the air thicken, as though the very atmosphere was listening. Jabari stepped forward, his heart pounding. "What does this mean, Azira? For my son, for my kingdom? What will become of Azarim?" Azira turned her gaze to Jabari, her eyes calm but filled with a sorrowful depth. "It means change, Jabari. The kingdom will either rise or fall depending on the choice you make. The sea does not ask for your permission, but it does not seek to destroy. It seeks to restore what was lost long ago." Jabari's mind raced, his thoughts a whirlwind of fear, pride, and regret. The kingdom he had built on tradition, on the old ways, was now being pulled into a new world, one he had never prepared for. Could he let go of everything he had known to embrace this unknown future? "I have lived my life with the weight of the crown," Jabari said, his voice raw. "But I see now that my choices were born of fear, of arrogance. Perhaps this is the price I must pay. But what will my people say? What will they do?" Azira's eyes softened. "They will fear the unknown, just as you did. But fear fades with time. You must show them that the future is not to be feared, but embraced. It is not the sea that will conquer Azarim, but your son. You must trust in him, Jabari." Sephu stepped forward, his eyes steady as he looked at both his father and the mermaid. "I will prove to the people of Azarim that I am worthy of the throne. I will unite the land and the sea, and together, we will ensure that Azarim thrives." Jabari, though still uncertain, felt a sense of pride swell within him. His son, the one he had once doubted, was now the very embodiment of Azarim's future. The journey ahead would not be easy, but it was the only path they could walk. Azira nodded, her face serene. "The choice is made. You will see the truth when the waters rise, Jabari. But know this, the sea will always be a part of you, and it will never forget." With that, Azira began to shimmer, her form dissolving into the air like mist rising from the ocean. Sephu watched her go, the weight of her words settling in his chest. The mermaid had come to deliver a message, but now the future was in his hands. The days following Azira's visit were filled with an uneasy tension that gripped the entire kingdom. Jabari, still shaken by the mermaid's words, withdrew into himself, his thoughts consumed by the burden of his decisions. He had long been a king of action, of force, but now he was forced to trust in something much more fragile, his son's ability to lead. Sephu, however, was determined. He spent his days speaking with the people, walking among them, listening to their concerns. The whispers of doubt still lingered, but with each passing day, he saw the people begin to change. Slowly, they began to trust him, to see the strength in his resolve. But not everyone was so easily swayed. In the shadows of Azurim, factions began to form, those who still believed in the old ways, those who feared the sea's influence, and those who sought power for themselves. The council, once Jabari's strongest support, now found itself divided. Some of the elders saw the wisdom in embracing the sea's power, while others viewed it as a threat to everything they had built. One such elder, a man named Baraka, was especially vocal in his opposition. A staunch defender of Azurim's traditions, Baraka saw Sefu's rise as a direct threat to the kingdom's stability. He had long been a trusted advisor to Jabari, but his loyalty was now in question. As Sefu continued to garner support, Baraka began to plot in the shadows, rallying those who were still loyal to the old ways. The palace, once a place of order, now felt like a pressure cooker, each day building toward an inevitable explosion. Jabari could feel the weight of it pressing on him, the voices of dissent growing louder, the whispers of rebellion more frequent. He knew that the time for words had passed. Action was needed. The night was quiet, the wind carrying the faint scent of salt from the sea. Jabari stood at the balcony of the palace, staring out over the darkened kingdom. The city below seemed peaceful, but the tension in the air was palpable. The storm was coming, and it was not the kind that could be weathered with patience. A shadow moved behind him, and Jabari turned to find Sefu standing in the doorway, his face grim. "It is time, father," Sefu said, his voice low. "Baraka has gathered his followers. They are planning something that could tear this kingdom apart." Jabari's heart sank. He had feared this moment, but now that it had arrived, there was no turning back. The people of Azurim were divided, and a civil war seemed inevitable. Baraka's rebellion was not just a threat to Sefu's rule, it was a threat to everything Jabari had worked for, everything he had built. "I will not let them destroy Azurim," Jabari said, his voice steely with determination. "We will fight back, and we will win." Sefu placed a hand on his father's shoulder, a gesture of reassurance. "We will fight together, father. The kingdom will stand, no matter what comes." Jabari nodded, feeling the weight of his decision settle on his shoulders. This was no longer just about his son's future or his own redemption. This was about the future of Azurim. The kingdom would either rise from the ashes, or it would fall into ruin. And so, with a sense of finality, Jabari made the decision that would change everything. The first signs of rebellion came in the form of a messenger, carrying word of Baraka's movements. He had raised an army, and they were marching toward the palace. The kingdom, once united under Jabari's rule, was now divided in two. Those loyal to the old ways were determined to fight for their traditions, while those who followed Sefu, the son of the sea, prepared to defend the throne. The battle was inevitable. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation as the palace braced for the storm that Baraka's rebellion had promised. The royal soldiers, once unwavering in their loyalty to King Jabari, now found themselves divided. Some remained loyal to the crown, while others, swayed by the growing whispers of Baraka's cause, were unsure where their allegiance truly lay. Sefu stood at the heart of the palace, surrounded by his most trusted men. His expression was calm, but his heart was a whirlpool of emotions. He knew that the battle ahead would not just determine the future of Azurim, it would also define his legacy. Would he be remembered as the prince who embraced change and unity, or the one who succumbed to bloodshed and division? Father and son had never been closer, but neither had they ever been more distant. Jabari had stepped back, allowing Sefu to take command, but his presence lingered over everything, like a shadow cast long over the land. Sefu had become the face of hope, but Jabari was the king who had broken the kingdom with his arrogance, his neglect of Azira's warnings, and his refusal to listen to the land's whispers. Night fell on Azurim, and with it, a heavy stillness that hung over the kingdom. The air seemed to hold its breath as the soldiers prepared for the coming fight. Jabari, standing alone in his private chambers, could hear the distant echo of the approaching army, the sound of footsteps, the rustle of armor, the hum of a world on the brink of war. The clash of swords rang out in the stillness of the night as Baraka's forces met the royal army at the edge of the city. The streets, once filled with the laughter of the people and the bustling of traders, were now bathed in the orange glow of torches and the red light of fire. The sound of combat echoed in every corner as Azarim's future was fought for, the fate of the kingdom hanging on the edge of a blade. Sephiu led the charge, his heart heavy with the weight of his responsibility. Behind him, the royal soldiers fought with the strength of loyalty, but there was an uncertainty in their movements. Many had fought beside Baraka in past wars, and now, they found themselves caught in a conflict that felt foreign to them. Were they defending the kingdom or fighting to uphold an outdated system? Jabari watched from the palace balcony, his eyes fixed on the chaos below. His heart ached with every swing of the sword, with every fallen soldier, but his hands were tied. His kingdom, once a symbol of strength and unity, was now a battlefield. The fight had become something much larger than him. It was the clash of old beliefs against new ideas, a war between tradition and progress. As the battle raged on, Sephiu found himself face to face with Baraka on the battlefield. The elder's eyes burned with the fire of conviction, but there was a deep sadness in his gaze. He had fought for Azarim for years, his loyalty to the kingdom unwavering. Yet now, he saw the kingdom slipping through his fingers, and he would do whatever it took to hold on to what he believed was right. "You are no longer my prince," Baraka spat, his voice thick with bitterness. "You've forsaken Azarim. You've forsaken your people for the sea." Sephiu's grip tightened on his sword, the weight of the words pulling at his heart. "No, Baraka. I have not forsaken my people. I have embraced the future. And your fear of change will destroy us all." Baraka swung his sword, and the two men locked in a fierce battle, each strike a reflection of the war within. It was more than just a fight for the throne, it was a battle for the soul of Azarim itself. The battle seemed endless, the air thick with smoke and the cries of the fallen. But through the chaos, Sephiu felt something deep within him, a sense of purpose, a connection to the sea that Azira had spoken of. He had never been as sure of anything as he was in that moment. His body moved with an instinctual grace, each swing of his sword guided not just by training but by something greater. Baraka's forces, once confident in their numbers, began to falter. The tide was turning, not because of superior strength, but because of something deeper, something intangible. The people of Azarim, those who had once whispered against Sephiu's rule, now began to rise with him. They saw the strength in his vision, in his ability to bridge the divide between the land and the sea. Jabari, watching from the palace, could feel the change in the air. The winds shifted, and with them came the sound of the sea, an echo of Azira's power, her call to arms. He knew that he could no longer stand aside. His son had proved himself, and now it was time for him to act. He descended from the palace, rallying his soldiers. The king was not dead yet, not in spirit, and not in heart. With renewed strength, Jabari joined the fray, his soldiers following in his wake. Together, father and son fought side by side, their swords cutting through the battlefield like a storm unleashed. Baraka, seeing his forces falter, knew the end was near. He fought with the desperation of a man whose beliefs were unraveling before his eyes. But Sephiu was unrelenting, his strikes swift and true. In the end, it was the weight of his destiny that overpowered Baraka's resolve. With one final blow, Baraka fell, his lifeless body crumpling to the ground. The battle was over, but the war for Azarim had only just begun. In the aftermath of the battle, the streets of Azarim were filled with the sounds of mourning and celebration. The cost of war had been steep, but the kingdom had been saved, at least for now. Sephiu, though victorious, felt the weight of the bloodshed upon his shoulders. His people, his family, had paid the price for his rise to power. Jabari, standing beside his son, saw the toll it had taken. "The kingdom is yours now, Sephiu. I have done all I can. It is time for you to lead Azarim into a new era." Sephiu nodded, his heart heavy with the responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. "We will rebuild, father. Together, we will rebuild, and we will honor the legacy of both the land and the sea." As the sun set over Azerim, the waters shimmered in the distance, a reminder of the promise Azira had made. The sea had not come to conquer, it had come to heal. And in the days to come, Sephi would face the greatest challenge of all, uniting the kingdom with the power of both the land and the sea. The aftermath of the battle was both a beginning and an end. The kingdom of Azerim was forever changed, and its people, though scarred by the bloodshed, held a new hope in their hearts. The death of Baraka, the old ways, and the destruction of a system that no longer served them had opened a new chapter for the kingdom. Sephi, now the rightful heir to the throne, stood on the balcony of the palace, watching the sun rise over the horizon. The morning light bathed the land in hues of gold and pink, casting a peaceful glow over the once barren battlefield. The sounds of rebuilding echoed through the city, but there was something different in the air, a sense of unity, of rebirth. Jabari stood beside his son, his expression a mixture of pride and reflection. He had witnessed the power of Sephi's vision, his ability to bridge the gap between the old and the new, between land and sea. The king had come to understand that it was not just strength and dominance that defined leadership, it was compassion, foresight, and the courage to face the unknown. "Sephi," Jabari began, his voice quiet but filled with sincerity. "You've done more than win a battle. You've brought our people together. For the first time, I truly believe we are ready for the future. You are not just the king of Azerim. You are its heart." Sephi turned to face his father, his eyes filled with both gratitude and sadness. "Father, it is not just my strength that has brought us here. It is the strength of the land, the sea, and the spirits that guide us. Azira's vision, your courage, and the will of our people have led us to this moment." The wind swept through the palace, carrying with it the faint sound of waves crashing against the shore. The sea, once a symbol of division, was now a reminder of the interconnectedness of all things. Sephi had learned that power did not come from conquering, but from understanding and respecting the balance of nature. The days that followed were filled with change. The remnants of the old guard, those who had once followed Baraka and his rebellion, were brought into the fold. Sephi did not seek to punish them, instead, he extended a hand of peace, knowing that healing would take time. He worked tirelessly to unite the kingdom, not just in name, but in spirit. A great council was held, where the voices of the people, both those of the land and the sea, were heard. Azira, though still a mysterious figure, had become a symbol of balance and wisdom. Her presence was felt in every decision, her teachings woven into the very fabric of the kingdom. One by one, the villages of Azerim began to flourish again. The once divided people now worked together, sharing resources and knowledge. The sea, once feared, was now respected, and its bounty was embraced. The land and the water were no longer separate entities, they were two parts of a greater whole, inseparable and vital to the kingdom's future. Sephi, with Azira by his side, led the charge toward rebuilding. He traveled to every corner of Azerim, speaking to the people, hearing their concerns, and addressing their needs. His leadership was not one of command, but of service. He knew that a king's duty was to his people, not to his own ego. The time came when Sephi, now fully embraced as the ruler of Azerim, took one final journey to the shores where he had first met Azira. The water glistened in the moonlight, and the air was thick with the scent of salt and earth. As he stood at the water's edge, a figure emerged from the depths, Azira. She rose from the sea like a vision, her form bathed in the light of the moon. Her skin shimmered with the hues of the ocean, her eyes filled with wisdom that transcended time. She had watched over Azerim for generations, guiding its rulers and protecting its people. Sephi, Azira's voice was soft, like the rustling of leaves in the wind. "You have done what many believed impossible. You have united the kingdom and restored its soul. Your heart is pure, and your intentions are true. Azerim will thrive under your reign." Sephi bowed his head in reverence. "It is because of you, Azira. Without your guidance, without your warnings, we would have lost ourselves. You showed me the way, not through force, but through understanding." Azira smiled, her gaze softening. You have learned well, Sephu. Your people will remember you not as a conqueror, but as a leader who sought peace and unity. The power of the sea flows through you, and it will guide Azarim to a future that is as bright as the stars. Years passed, and Azarim flourished. Sephu ruled with wisdom, his reign marked by peace, prosperity, and unity. The kingdom became a beacon of hope for neighboring lands, a place where the land and sea were one, where the old and new coexisted in harmony. Jabari, now an elder, watched with pride as his son took his place in history. He had seen Sephu grow from a reckless youth into a wise and compassionate leader. The king's heart was at peace, knowing that the kingdom was in good hands. As for the people of Azarim, they sang songs of their king, songs of the land, the sea, and the mermaid who had saved their kingdom. They spoke of the day when the arrogant prince became the wise ruler, and of the love between the sea and the land that had brought them together. And so, Azarim prospered, a kingdom united by the wisdom of the sea, the strength of the land, and the courage of its people. The story of Sephu, the son of Jabari, and the mermaid Azira, would be told for generations to come, a tale of redemption, unity, and the power of love.